Alright, so in the last video I promised to show you what would happen or what you could do to fix this problem of things resizing or resizing fonts and resizing the background to fit the font. And I mentioned there's a couple of ways you could handle this. You might want to resize the font in a way that it exactly keeps the scale. You know, you might want to set the background so that it exactly keeps the scale, or so that it just fits the font as it is. So I'm going to make mine kind of, I want it to just fit the font, if I make the font small again, it'll go back to its original thing. So that's the way I'm going to build mine. Before I get going, though, I did notice that this height thing doesn't quite center right. So I'm going to put in a little, do a little fudging in here with the calculate point. Instead of this dividing by 2, or which is multiplying by 1/2, right? I'm going to multiply by, so basically dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by 0.5, right? So what I'm going to do instead is multiply by 0.45. Now you'll notice what happens when I hit compile here. It says cannot find symbol constructor point int double, because when you multiply by 0.5 here, that changes this whole number into a double. So we need to cast this guy to an int. And now he compiles, and now it's a little bit centered, a little bit better height-wise. So okay, so what we need to do is, in order to come up with a good scaling factor for the background, we should have a figure out what the canvas, or what the canvas normally would be without being scaled. Right, so we could have where's our drawstring? Let's work from there. So what we could do is let's write a method that gets we'll write one method that gets the unscaled width and another one that gets the unscaled height, right? So the background image if we don't do any rescaling of the background image, then the background, and there is a background image, then that should give us the unscaled, the width of the unscaled image, right? Otherwise, though, if we don't have any background image, we have to figure out what to do here, right? We have to return something. So I'm going to put a -1 for now, because I just want to make sure it compiles. And then let's figure out what to do about this unscaled width. So let's look at, when we're starting out in our constructor here, we initially create an image that's 200 by 300. So what we could do is, if we could just go up here and create a couple of ints, private int unscaled width, height, and we could have those keep track of our original numbers here, this 200, 300. So we could say this unscaled width equals, and instead of saying 200, let's say have a default width and a default height. Public final static int default default canvas width equals 200, and oh, these should be private. These don't need to be public. You should generally like keep stuff private unless you think you might have a good reason to make it public. Canvas height equals 30. You know, you can always change it to public later on if you decide that's what you want to do, but generally it's better to start with things private. So width and height. Oh, you know what? That's not how I wanted to do it. I'm going to set this to width. And this unscaled height equals. And that way you could always add setters and getters to change your unscaled width and unscaled height if you wanted to. Because you might want to do something like change the width and the height of the canvas without changing the font size, or I don't know. But that's what I'm going to do for now, is set like this. Does that compile? All right, so now what we can do is, when we go down here, if we don't have a background, we can just use this unscaled width. Okay, and then the same thing with height. Okay, so, and this kind of gives us a way also of getting back to our original, values for that, for the width and height too, if we need to do that. Okay, so let's see. So how are we gonna figure out the new dimensions of the canvas, the new dimensions we want for the canvas based on what we know now? Well, let's make a method that figures out what the new dimensions are going to be. So it's going to return a dimension, a width and a height, right? I'm going to say get new dimension, and we'll pass it a width and a height to start off with, and it'll use those with that width and height that gets passed in to calculate a new width and height, what the new width and height should be. And what we'll do is, because in order to maintain the right proportions, you don't want to like change the width, and then like if you have a square, right? If you multiply the width by 2, and you also want to multiply the height by 2. So we'll have a scale factor. So this is the number we'll multiply the width and the height by to get our new width and height. Okay. So the scale factor, we'll start it off at 1. And I'm going to make it a float in case, because if we have a scale factor of like 1.5, we want to make sure that that half gets figured in. So let's check now. Well, what do we need to see? Well, we need to see if our string width string width label is bigger than our canvas width. And how do we, let's see, string width label is bigger than canvas.getWidth. And we're going to do some stuff here. And we're going to eventually, I'll put return null at the bottom, but I just want to see if this, okay, that compiles. So where is this label coming from? This label value, is this an instance variable, or what is that? Yeah, so we have an instance variable label, right? The only problem with that is, what if we're doing label plus a number? And I don't want to, I could set the label to be the label plus the number, but then if I want to change the number, that's going to make a mess. So maybe what I need to do here then is, when I say get new dimension, I should probably also pass in the label. So I'm going to say string label. I'm going to say that. All right. So if the string width of the label is bigger than the canvas width, then let's see, what do we want our scale factor to be? Then our scale factor should basically be the string width of the label divided by canvas.getWidth. And why is that? Well, the idea here is the scale factor is the number that we're gonna, canvas.getWidth. We're gonna multiply. Once we get these new dimensions, we're going to multiply. It's the canvas that we want to grow. It's the canvas that we want to get bigger, right? So if we multiply the width of the canvas by this number, what we'll get is the string width, right? Because if we multiply by canvas get width, if we multiply by the denominator, we'll just get the whole numerator back, okay? So that's why we set our scale factor to that. The only problem here is string width returns an integer and get width returns an integer. And we want our scale factor to be a nice float. So let's go ahead and cast both of those guys to be floats. So when we divide, we'll get a nice float. And then we can say int. Now our width and height need to be integers because when we do the resizing, we need integers. So what we'll do is we'll say width equals, we do want to say width equals width times the scale factor, right? But if we try to compile that, see it says possible loss of precision, float found, required int. if we cast this to an int, and I'm going to go ahead and put parentheses around here because it's the whole product that I want to cast to an int, not just width. So let's compile that. Okay, so that compiles without errors. So let's do the same thing. Now, remember what I said before about multiplying a square, multiplying the sides of a square by 2. You want to multiply the width and the height by 2, right? So it's the same thing here. Once we get our scale factor, we want to multiply the width and the height by the same scale factor. Okay. So now, what? Well, now we want to check to see if the string height is too much. So if the string height is bigger than, so now we've already figured out a new height based on the width, based on the string width, right? So we might have changed the height already. So let's use this. Oh, in fact, we better, you know what we should do? So we have width and height passed down. Okay, so let's assume we're passing down the unscaled width and height. Right, okay, so then if the string width, so actually what we want to do is let's base everything off of width and height instead of using instead of making assumptions about, you know, where we're getting these width and heights from. Let's just do everything off that, because now, see, we've changed our height value. What we really should be doing is checking to see if it's bigger than that height, right? And then if it's bigger than that height, then we want to do something similar to this. I'm going to copy it. What we want is to check the string height, and that, remember, string height doesn't require any inputs. And then, because see, our height might have changed, so it's not a good idea to use that canvas get height, get width, all that jazz. So, and this gets us away from having to pull that out. So, oh, the only thing is, if we're using our unscaled, yeah, no, I think that's right, because we're scaling everything according to the original dimensions. I think that's right. So let's return dimension, width, and height. I cannot find symbol. Oh, we gotta make it new, don't we? Okay. Yeah, I think we're on the right track here. So let's try now. What do we do with that information? Let's go back up to drawstring. Okay, so now in drawstring, we can use this dimension d equals get new dimension, and I'm going to start off with the unscaled width and the unscaled height. Okay, and then we're going to do some calculating in here to do the resizing that we need to do. But I'm going to leave that till the next video. This one's getting too long. I'll see you in the next video.